The Book of Five Rings. The Book of Water. In the Book of Water, the entire strategy of my two-sword school is revealed. You should think each thing through completely and not simply gloss over the words. It is important to understand what you are reading and studying. Should you approach a concept that you do not understand, it would be foolish if you are making the warrior way your lifestyle to continue on. When I say that language is limited in certain respects, it should be understood that while information may be evident, knowledge is not necessarily obvious. There are hidden meanings, not to be confused with non-understandable things, that must be thought through constantly until you reach an understanding. When you reread this book, you will see another level of understanding come to light. In fact, each time you pick the book up to study it again, you will interpret the teachings differently. This does not mean that your previous understanding was wrong. It simply means that you are proceeding to ask the spirit of the thing to reveal itself on a higher level. While it appears the rules of strategy are explained here in terms of single combat fights, you should also think on a larger plane to understand battles involving many men. There is no limit to a man's ability once he understands the strategic principles of an art, for they will also be useful when applied to other situations. It is important for you to make sure you understand what you are reading. When you study strategy and grasp meanings even slightly incorrectly, you will eventually be far off course. When you understand what I am telling you, apply what you have learned to your everyday life. Imitation is the surest form of flattery and failure. I am not interested with your talk about my ideas. I am more interested in your applying them to your life. If you do not, then you are essentially not in accord with your own mind. This does not apply to those of you who read merely for enjoyment, but only to those who strive to be warriors. Study so as to absorb my teachings into your heart. The importance of correct spiritual and physical bearing in strategy. The manner in which a warrior carries himself is of the utmost importance, both physically and mentally. You are undoubtedly familiar with men who are quiet and strong, and seem to be doing nothing. They do not appear to be tense, and do not appear to be in disarray. They simply appear. This is exactly the appearance for which they strive. When it is necessary to attack, they do so with complete resolve, sure of themselves, neither overbearing in attitude, nor with false humility. They attack with one purpose, and one purpose only, to destroy the enemy. They do not take false postures when they prepare for attack. They simply attack with all their heart and soul. A small man can beat a much larger man, and one man can beat many men in a fight. Allow your wisdom to develop by constantly striving to perfect yourself in your own art, and by understanding the arts of others. When you understand yourself, and you understand the enemy, you cannot be defeated. Be aware at all times of what is right and wrong among men. Do not permit yourself to be intimidated by the size of the enemy. Do not be fooled by your own misunderstanding of what your purpose is. To do so is wrong thinking, and means that you are not studying the principles of my way properly. Whether on or off the battlefield, there is no difference in spirit. The warrior sees all of life as the battlefield. Do not lose heart if the enemy's appearance is overwhelming. You must commit yourself to constant study in order to develop the perfection in your soul, evident in the demeanor of the spirit. How you should stand in combat readiness. I always stress form and balance. If you are lax in your stances and positioning, then you will be unable to perform your technique effectively. Focus your concentration on only one thing, making the hit. Narrow your eyes slightly, and ever so subtly flare your nostrils. Always fight with your spine erect and unbent. Keep your shoulders relaxed and lowered. Tighten your abdominal muscles and root yourself into the ground. Make yourself bigger in your mind than you are as a manner of intimidating the enemy. Slowly work your way toward the enemy until you are ready to strike. Then do so with utmost conviction, quickness, and power. Keep your weapons ready at all times. You should practice the proper stances and movements prior to using any fighting technique, and in this manner, establish your own sense of being through your particular art. How often have you witnessed so-called experts with no form or balance? You see them as clods with no style or grace. Think this through and consider how you yourself wish to be seen should the time come for you to move. Think about being seen only by yourself and not through the eyes of others. Why would you want to appear as one thing and be another? If you are a warrior, then you are a warrior. And if you are not a warrior, then you are not a warrior. The way of the warrior is the way of the warrior. To be a warrior, look like a warrior, and stand like a warrior. Do not be false to yourself. Looking at the enemy. Look at the enemy as if you are looking through him, without being too obvious about it. Perception and sight are two important principles in my strategy. Perception relies on intuition. This is developed through practice. Sight is based on the physical ability to use the eyes. Understand the difference and sameness of perception and sight. One must be prepared for the possibility of losing one's sight in mortal combat. Learn to see things far away and up close. This applies as well to the attitudes towards stance and positioning. Do not prejudge a view according to what you think things should appear to be, but instead look at all things equally, and in this way you cannot excuse me. Do not prejudge a view according to what you think things should appear to be, but instead look at all things equally, and in this way you will be able to discern what can hurt you and what cannot. Peripheral vision is of the utmost importance. It is a skill that is developed over a period of time in training. This is a stern discipline. It should be used in everyday life as well. I must insist upon training as the means of attaining excellence in the craft of the warrior. Steadfastness of purpose is above all the essential requirement for understanding yourself in relation to the universe. If you lack this, you will be easily led into false securities, and will therefore become easy to defeat. Force yourself to develop the skills needed to be the warrior that you define yourself to be. Remember, as you submit to the spirit of the thing, that the spirit of the thing will submit to you. Holding the longsword. It is important for you to understand the proper manner in which to hold the longsword. The grip should be both loose and tight at the same time. What I mean by this is that you should hold the sword firmly and resolutely, yet at the same time, your hand and wrist must be pliable. Hold the sword as you would a fishing rod, and strike with it as if you were casting a fishing line. Hold the sword tightly with the bottom two fingers to give yourself the added support you need to wield the long sword correctly. Direct the sword with your thumb and forefinger. These principles apply to the unarmed martialist as well. Having some play in your hands is essential in your structured physical attitude, whatever you're trying to accomplish. If you do not hold the sword correctly, you stand a chance of losing control of the weapon when in combat. If you strike a hard object and your grip is not strong, you can drop the sword as a result. In unarmed styles of fighting, the fist must be held tightly and the wrist must be straight. The problems that will occur if you do not do this include breaking your wrist on contact and the inability to focus with all your heart and soul with a weakened wrist. In knife-hand techniques, the fingers must be drawn tightly together to prevent the breaking of the fingers if your strike is not focused correctly. If your fingers are drawn tightly together, you will have no problems with focusing. When a warrior draws his sword, the main intention must be to cut the enemy down. There is no reason to change your grip when you strike the enemy. When you have forced the enemy to lose control of his sword because of your parrying thrust, do not change your hand position. Do not show your enemy false bravado because it is certain to get you killed, especially if the enemy is well trained. Likewise, when you put aside the enemy's sword or block the enemy's strike, you must be intent on following up with a powerful attack to win the fight. The martial arts are not a game to see who is stronger and who is faster. You must mean it when you strike at the enemy. If you do not, you will certainly get hurt. The only reason to draw your sword is to cut the enemy. The only reason to draw your sword is to cut the enemy down. It is essential that you understand that there is no difference between using the sword in combat and in practice. There is no such thing as a grip for striking and a grip for practice. Even in practice, you must strike with all your heart and with all your soul. To do otherwise will result in your being unable to strike with full force and conviction should the need arise. Every strike must be done with full authority and full intensity. A bullet from a gun does not make a distinction between practice and combat. You are training to be one in the same way in your entire life. I do not like the idea of stubbornness in the grip. Stubbornness means non-flexibility. Your hands must be both pliable and firm. This means that you must practice all techniques in the same manner, regardless of which way you hold your sword in sword fighting or your hand in unarmed methods. Understanding the movement of your body through proper footwork. There's no difference between walking and running into battle or walking and running in everyday life, except for speed. Proper movement of the body depends entirely on the manner in which you carry yourself. The feet carry the body, and the body directs the feet. Tread firmly, with the heel touching the ground first, and then roll forward to the ball of your foot. Practice this until you appear to move without motion. Do not use different types of steps such as jumping, gliding, or hopping. Combat is an aspect of your everyday life if you follow the path of the warrior. Do not allow for differences in your attitude. Refer back to the discussion on stances and positions. Special types of movement are used specifically for special techniques and are not to be cultivated to form your being in motion. Walking is walking, whether in an excursion to the park or in a combat maneuver. The ancients tell us to walk in the manner of yin and yang. Even when you step forward, backward, or sideways, with one foot, the other foot is not to be considered apart from the whole. When you attack right foot forward, or when you attack left foot forward, the idea is to move the body and not just the feet. The incorrect way of moving the feet will eventually trip you up and make you lose your balance. This is bad for the warrior, as it causes a loss of poise. You should practice all techniques from both sides of the body. In this way, you will not become used to functioning from only one direction. To do so is foolish and diminishes your abilities. Do not be a righty or a lefty. Become both by practicing your movements from all directions. The 5 positions of attack. If we consider the possibilities for attacking the enemy, we can clearly see that there are only 5 ways to do so. You attack the upper, middle, lower, right, and left sides only. This does not exclude attacking from behind the enemy's back. I am talking about attacking. You should understand the reason for this. You can only attack the upper, middle, lower, right, or left side of the body. Front or rear goes without saying. It is still upper, middle, lower, right, or left side. Even though this may seem ridiculous to mention, there are those who will seek to attack in a completely disjointed fashion when coming from the rear, and thereby fail to beat an enemy. Nothing fancy is involved. You go straight to the heart of the matter and defeat the enemy. There is nothing else involved. You either do it or you don't. There's only one purpose in attacking the enemy: to cut him down with finality. Go straight into the heart of the enemy. Your main purpose as a warrior is to defeat the enemy. Do not be sidetracked by the appearances of the enemy or yourself. Do not be conscious of the particular technique you will use. This causes hesitation. If you understand this mentality, you will never be beaten. Your attitude will be recognized by potential enemies, and they will prefer to fight someone else. The ultimate aim of the martial arts is not having to use them. It is always best to attack straight ahead. Your attack must be filled with conviction and purpose. In this way you defeat the enemy regardless of his abilities. Straight ahead attacks are decisive. This does not mean that straight-in attacks have no circular movements. Research this well. Depending upon where you are fighting, you must understand when to use a front attack and when to use a side attack. It should not be a conscious decision in combat. This is why you must constantly practice from all sides. Going to the side means that you are encountering some sort of obstruction, perhaps another weapon, a strong attacking force, or something else. Everything emanates from a central core. This is true of all things regardless of their appearance. That is why it is said that you emphasize everything you do from the middle of your heart. An attack of any kind must originate from the center of the warrior and go directly to the center of the enemy. It is important to understand the need for concentrating your attack on the middle and letting it take its own course by going up, down, left, or right according to the needs of the spirit of the thing itself. If we observe a large battle arena, we generally see the commander in the middle of the troops. All the other positions surround him. He can therefore direct things accordingly, see clearly, and defeat the enemy with the appropriate strategy. Understanding the nature of the longsword. In order to be able to fight well, you must understand how to handle your weapons, whether they be swords or fists. Constant practice and becoming one with your sword are essential. Even if you should pick up a different weapon, by knowing the heart and nature of your own weapon, you will be able to defeat men because of your sensitivity to the one. You must understand the limitations of what you are using before you can use them well. Think about this. It will become obvious in time. Regardless of combat circumstance, you must always remain calm. Calmness is attained through meditation and belief in your own skills. It is not to be confused with egotistical technique, which generally fails under intense combat situations. Regardless of combat circumstances, you must always remain calm. Calmness is attained through meditation and belief in your own skills. It is not to be confused with egotistical technique, which generally fails under intense combat situations. Do not try to use techniques that do not fit the situation. An attack must be executed with quickness, not speed. Attack with power, not strength. There is a great difference between speed and quickness, power and strength. Think this through very carefully. It is the essence of strategy. You can use alternate devices as weapons, but their properties must be known or they might fail in a fight. A punch is a punch, a kick is a kick, and a strike is a strike. Do not confuse them with each other, as many often do when trying to use a kick technique where a punch is needed. A long punch is ineffective if used as a jab, and likewise, a jab is ineffective if used like a lunge punch. Understand the properties of the long sword and the short sword. Understand your weapons. Always return your weapon along the same path it traveled out on. In this way, you can use it again without having to relocate and rethink your attitude. The same applies to bringing the opposite hand back to the hip when you execute a punching strike. You must do this with authority and not in a haphazard manner. To fire a powerful punch requires that you fire straight and true while at the same time bringing the other hand back into a firing mode. Otherwise, both movements will be weak. The 5 approaches. I must insist that you understand the need for constant training with the correct attitudes in order to wield a sword properly. The way of the warrior is an exacting way, and the spirit of the thing itself will not be trifled with. You must understand my 5 approaches to strategy. The best way to attack is to the center of the enemy. Always go to the middle of the enemy's face. It is easier to veer off in another direction from the center than it is to cover excessive ground in getting from the right side to the left side, or the left side to the right side. When you attack, you generally have to ward off an attack at the same time. This is called deflection. It is not the same as striking at the enemy's weapon. This is an entirely different matter. In blocking, you are trying to ward off an attack. Striking at the enemy's weapon misdirects the attack in order to open a target for yourself. Riding the enemy's weapon means the same thing. Your attack must be based on both parts of this maneuver. Neither one nor the other, but both. If it is not, then it is not an attack done with conviction and will not be effective. Being directly in the enemy's face is the same thing as pointing your sword into the enemy's face. Your directness is what will enable you to succeed. The upper attack is the second of my attacking strategies. An attack must be made with the idea of repeating it. It is not always possible to cut the enemy or hit the enemy with only one attack. You must not permit confusion to get in the way of your work. Do your work well and do it effectively. When you have come to see that technique is the basis for allowing the spirit to express itself, then you can beat the enemy. Always be aware of the possibility of changing timing and rhythm. The lower attack is done as if arising from the earth. Hit the enemy's hand from underneath his sword position. It is the same as kicking an unarmed fighter in the groin while he is in an attacking position. If your attack is acted upon by the enemy, change direction and come in from the side. The main idea is to move on the enemy instantly upon perceiving his own approaching attack. Superlative speed is essential to be able to move on the enemy at the instant of his attack. Speed does not mean necessarily being faster than the enemy. It means being smarter than the enemy. Think in terms of quickness. An enemy will only attack if he feels sure of himself. This is why it is important to develop perception. Knowing the enemy will attack does not give you license to only fight with a counter-attacking attitude. You must have the courage to go into the attack without thinking in terms of anything but cutting or striking the enemy. Always maintain the attitude of defeating your enemy with one strike. Practice your attacks with the attitude of going in. The longsword means that you use your primary weapon yourself. Attacking from the left side is the 4th approach. Parry from the outside and attack from the left side. You may also attack from the right side. The left side attitude is a method of combat and not a specific technique. Deflect the advancing sword by going into the attack, and the instant you touch his sword, swing your sword up, across, and down. The 5th approach is to attack from the right side of the enemy. Use the same manner as with the left side attitude, for this is neither more nor less important than any of the other approaches. A methodology is employed, not a specific technique. Words are not adequate to fully explain what I mean with regard to my 5 approaches to strategy. The concepts are intuitive. You must constantly practice all of your techniques until they become second nature. Once they are a part of your nature, you can cease to think about them. You must understand yourself, and you must understand the enemy. In the later sections, specific attitudes and ideals are discussed more fully. You would also do well to remember that what I say and how you perceive what I say can be completely different depending on your awareness of yourself and the level of skill that you have attained. The need for constant study and thought is essential for understanding the way of the warrior. The strategy of attack, no attack. It does not matter which of the 5 attitudes you use, because in every situation you must be flexible enough to change the entire structure of your attack, the main purpose being that of cutting or striking the enemy dead. You must wield your sword properly. Be prepared in spirit to change the direction of your attack at any moment. In practice, attack to the upper, and in mid-attack immediately change direction to a lower attack. Attack from the left side, and immediately change your attack to a direct middle thrust. Change direction from the right side to a lower attack, to an immediate left side attack. Constantly experiment and train yourself to understand the changes of my attack no attack strategy. It is absolutely essential that you understand what is being said here. You cannot take a certain attitude and depend upon it entirely. There are too many variations in attacks from the enemy. What you may think is effective may in fact be ineffective because of the way in which the enemy is feeling at that particular moment. Your attitude must be such that you can shift into any other mode of combat without having to make a conscious decision. You must be flexible, and you must have no particular liking for any particular set of techniques. Think this through very carefully. It is the basis of the warrior's way. A warrior has only one objective, to destroy the enemy by whatever means necessary. If you do not understand this teaching, then how are you... A warrior has only one objective, to destroy the enemy by whatever means necessary. If you do not understand this teaching, then how can you ever hope to do what you are trying to accomplish? You must go into combat with the attitude of absolutely destroying the enemy. If you do not develop this attitude, what are you doing there in the first place? Combat fighting is not done for fun. Even in practice sessions, you must have the attitude of going in for the kill. Remember, the main idea behind becoming a warrior is learning how to destroy the enemy. Without destroying the enemy, you are playing a child's game. Destroy the enemy at any cost, even if it means that you yourself may possibly be hurt in the exchange. Think of nothing but cutting the enemy down. Even when large enemies go into battle, their main attitude must be to destroy the enemy, otherwise they will lose and be disgraced. There is no other reason to be a warrior. Becoming one with hitting the enemy. Perception and intuition are essential in the attitude of destroying the enemy. You must train hard to be able to move into the attack and stop it before it occurs. This takes great courage. It takes dedication to the art you are practicing. You cannot hope to attain perfection if you cannot go into the attack and destroy the enemy by becoming one with the attack. You must attack as quickly and as directly as possible. You must be able to strike the enemy, even should he go into a retreat posture. You must continue on. You must not hesitate, and you must be relentless in your conviction. This takes great effort in training and meditation, but it must be done. You must continue in with your attack, regardless of the attitude of the enemy. It is hard to understand this without actual practice and more practice. You must have a trainer assisting you in your practice. But if you don't, then you must firmly develop the concreteness of the idea into your own mind and body, and practice with all your heart and soul. Your attack must be relentless, and it must not be thought of as a thing in itself. No thought, no idea. There is no need to wait for the enemy to start combat. You go into the attack, and if the enemy decides to go in at the same time, then you must be quicker, more focused, more resolved. It is essential that you go into the attack with your body leading your hands and feet. You achieve this by having a more determined attitude and a stronger spirit. Have no preconceived ideas about how a situation should come out. Go into the attack with the attitude of destroying the enemy, and you surely will if your spirit is up to the occasion and your heart is into the matter. And you do not fear the possibility of being hurt in the exchange. Press in hard with your body, shout with force and authority, and let your hands come from nowhere to destroy the enemy. Attacking through the enemy. When you are in a situation where neither you nor the enemy seem to be able to make the opening needed for the kill, you must summon more resoluteness from within yourself to explode into the enemy's face and body, again leaping in with quickness and deliberateness. Think only of destroying the enemy by any means necessary. Combinations of attack. When you clash with another warrior and there is no release of conviction on either part, you must employ a diversion in your attack. Strike high, low, and middle, using whatever means are necessary to finish off the opponent. You must learn different combinations and techniques down to your soul, and they must come without thinking. In unarmed forms of fighting, you attack with punches, kicks, and strikes in rapid succession without pause. Each and every attack you make must be done with full force and authority. You cannot attack half-heartedly. When you finish with one technique, you must immediately continue on with yet another and another until you have attained your goal, which is to destroy the enemy. The flame and flash cut. You must attack with intense focus. You cannot waste time or movement. When both swords come together, your flame must be resolved to penetrate in a flash with utmost intensity. You can never waver with the intent of your attack. Go in deeply with your body. Not doing so will permit your enemy to find an opening and perhaps destroy you. This you do not want. Go into the attack with everything you have, and then, if necessary, regroup and do it again. The falling leaves cut. Falling leaves means that you drop into the enemy with subtle but overwhelming strategy. Falling on the enemy is attacking without preconceived ideas as to how to conclude the battle. In this way, you will gain control over the enemy's sword. It is essential that you practice and develop powerful deflection and parrying techniques. Strive to control your enemy's sword. Without practiced deflection and parrying, you are left only with the possibility of having to constantly get around the enemy. The importance of deflection and parrying techniques cannot be stressed enough. Put as much emphasis into your deflection technique as you put into your parrying technique, and turn the attitude of blocking into one of attacking. In this manner, you will certainly be able to disable the enemy with only blocks. The sword as an extension of the body. The whole idea in combat is to hit the enemy and destroy him. You absolutely must learn to attack with your whole body using the sword as an extension, just as the arms and legs are extensions of the body. When you attack with your whole being, there is little room left for thinking about overprotecting certain areas. You are committed to the attack, and you are not concerned about the possibility of getting hurt in retaliation. There are times when you must compress your spirit prior to exploding, and times when you must explode before compressing. This is called the yin-yang attack. There is no one way to attack and destroy the enemy. Use combinations, single attacks, multiple attacks, etc., with all the tools of your craft, such as punching, kicking, and striking. Destroy the enemy by any and all means. Differences in cutting and slashing attacks. You must be utterly resolved to cut the enemy down. Slashing can be equated with just tapping the enemy with either a sword or a fist. It is not a truly resolved and committed attack. Cutting means that you are firmly resolved to destroy the enemy in one move. This is urgently important to understand. Regardless of the intent of the enemy, you must fire with full force and authority. If you do not, then the opponent will see you as weak, and perhaps will have no difficulty in cutting you. Cutting is proper form and understanding. Slashing is based on a lack of skill and little belief in your own skills. The bashful monkey's body. The bashful monkey does not reach out with his arms. There is no spirit in the intention of the attack, and it is usually used by those who do not understand the strategy of an attack. The bashful monkey is unsure of himself and is probably thinking of the possibility of being hurt. By keeping yourself at more than arm's distance from the enemy, you are essentially not being sure of your own abilities. The attitude of destroying the enemy with one cut is based on the attitude of going into the attack. If not, your spirit is lacking and your resolve is less than complete. You must always close in on the enemy, regardless of the indications of the enemy's strength. Sticking to the enemy like glue. Sticking to the enemy like glue means not permitting a gap to grow between yourself and the enemy in combat. You are committed to the attack, and should the enemy retreat, you must continue on with your attack, making sure that you have cut him down. Not to do so is to practice hesitation. Hesitating, even for an instant, allows the enemy to turn against you and possibly defeat you. If you do not stick to the enemy like glue, you are insecure in your convictions. You must develop your spirit to be able to drive right through the enemy, without worrying about whether or not you will be hit in return. When you lead with your head, and let your body lag, you are effectively throwing your balance off and giving the enemy a target at which to fire. You must drive with your spirit, because when you do so, your head, legs, and body will move as one, making yourself bigger than you are. This is a strong warrior attitude. Extend your spirit above and beyond the enemy's body and spirit. Never cringe in fear, and never fight without your spine being straight. This indicates your resoluteness to go in hard and deep to cut the enemy down. You first beat the enemy with your spirit, then you beat the enemy with your hands or your sword. Stretch out your body and your spirit. Go for the kill with utter resolve and commitment. Being tenacious in your bearing. Stay with the enemy, and do not allow him to force any distance between you, for this generally gives the enemy room to maneuver, and a chance to bring about a successful counterattack. Do not permit yourself to lose your composure. Do not permit the enemy to separate from you. Do not permit yourself to grapple with the enemy, for this becomes a contest of strength, and may prevent you from performing with conviction to slay the enemy with one stroke. Striking deep with the body. Striking deep at the body means penetrating right into the enemy's face with full resolve and commitment. When you use your body to penetrate, you may be able to knock the enemy off balance, enabling you to continue in with your attack. You should understand the need to be able to blast the enemy's body away from his center of balance. You do this the way it is explained. You drive your spirit through the enemy's spirit, using the enemy's body by driving in with your shoulder and focusing your strike against the enemy's very being. You must focus intently, and when you have moved the enemy out of position, you absolutely must fire with authority, killing the enemy with a single and perfectly executed stroke. 3 ways to strategically counter an attack. My 3 methods of countering an attack apply to sword fighting as well as unarmed combat. One method is to block an attack by diverting the enemy's sword and continuing to attack right into the enemy's eyes. Another is to sidestep and feint to the side while firing a strike to the other side of the body. A third method is to feign a thrust and dive straight into the enemy's face with a powerful attack. You must attack with the attitude of cutting, rather than slashing. It is quite acceptable to attack the enemy with your bare hand in combination with the sword. In any event, you must always close in on the enemy, and not give him a chance to counter against you. Stabbing at the face. When you are aiming for the face, the enemy will know it, and possibly look to protect the area with a number of different techniques. It is at the very second that you see him move that you must charge in with a substantial attack to the body, or even to the face. You can approach any area of the enemy's body when he shows any sign of hesitation. What is important is that you continue your attack regardless of where you actually hit him. Aiming for one spot and having your sword make the hit in another spot is something that you will have to develop through constant practice. Stabbing at the heart. In fighting, it is always best to go straight in. Always go straight in, with utter resolve, regardless of the situation. You must not waver when you are making the attack. Doing so will give the enemy the opportunity to go around your attack and beat you. There are times when you will have to use other methods to destroy the enemy, such as coming in from the left side or the right side, or from the upper, middle, or lower approaches, but in most situations, it is best to go straight in. Think about this as you visualize your methodology. To humiliate the enemy by blocking and countering. In real combat, there are usually many blows thrown by each of the combatants. It is truly rare for a fight to consist of one man attacking and the other countering. You must practice constantly to understand the need to continuously strike and counterstrike until your will overcomes the will of the enemy. It is essential that you be able to fire a death strike as a natural extension of your block. You will be able to develop this concept through the repetitive practice of your formal exercises. You must practice with the intensity of real-life situations or it becomes a game and you can be easily beaten. The slapping away counterattack. It is important to understand rhythm when you are in combat. The importance of following the enemy's motions and his manner of preparing to attack is crucial to understanding the difference between beating him and being beaten. The idea is to use the enemy's attack as a springboard for your own quick cut attack. You must understand rhythm as an essential part of timing. When you have your timing down, you can become unbeatable because your attack cannot become... When you have your timing down, you can become unbeatable because your attack cannot be made to waver even a little. You must think of the entire action as one motion, and not 2 separate moves consisting of a block and a counter. Think this through thoroughly, and understand what an attack really is. Enemies continue to come. This is a very important lesson. When you are fighting more than one enemy, you must use both of your swords and strike quickly and strongly without hesitation. You must go for the strongest attacker first, regardless of the appearances of the others. With practice, you will understand how to recognize the strongest attacker. You must constantly move around the fighting area, and make sure to befuddle the gang by constantly moving into them and keeping them to one side. You must constantly chase them and not permit them to surround you. They are generally not prepared for this type of retaliation, and you will have them under your control if you remember to maintain your spirit and destroy them one after another in a consistent fashion. You must continue to fire at them until they are all down, and you are certain that they cannot regroup for another attack. If you fail to do this, and come under their influence, you will surely be beaten. You must never let this happen. There are more than one against you, and you must even the sides as quickly as possible. Therefore, strive to practice with the idea of moving from one technique directly into the rest without hesitation. Practice correct breathing so you are able to maintain the stamina you need. By constantly moving around, you give them little choice in their space to fight, and they can be controlled and taken out in quick succession. You must also fight with the attitude of no mind. Do not think of possible outcomes until you have finished with your battle. To do so is foolish and takes your mind off the primary objective, which is to destroy the enemy. Think only of destroying the enemy, and the technique will flow of itself. Taking the advantage in combat. Practice is the only way that you will ever come to understand what the way of the warrior is about. Constant striving for perfection of the self through a chosen art is the only path to enlightenment. Words can only bring you to the foot of the path, and to attain mastery and perfection, you must constantly strive to better yourself through an understanding of your chosen way. One attack only. Contemplate winning all your victories with one attack. One attack only. Contemplate winning all your victories with only one strike. You must understand that the reason for your one strike is to slay the enemy. The obvious answer to all things is practice and more practice. The more you practice, the more the spirit of the thing itself will reveal itself to you. For whatever reason you have chosen to be a warrior, you must understand your responsibility to the art and to yourself. They are one and the same. Understanding the spirit of oneness with yourself and your sword. The entire purpose of my water book is to teach you how to become a warrior by using my method of strategy. It is important that you understand each line in it. This is the true basis for learning the way of the warrior, for by doing so you are also practicing strategy. Carefully learn the 5 approaches and the 5 strategies for combat. These principles of strategy work whether you are fighting 1 man or 20 men. Carefully study rhythm and timing. Strategy is the same in all cases. Remember that you must kill the enemy correctly. Not doing so is not the way of the warrior. Continue to study my strategy, and in time you will certainly understand what it is truly about, and it will become a part of your very being. It will become your spirit. This ends the Book of Water.